The Bible is not a series of disconnected stories. It is one narrative that points to one person, Jesus. As a matter of fact, we can summarize the whole Bible in 2 words. Jesus wins. Amen. You guys know this because for 7 weeks you've done Revelation, and you know that we summarize the whole Bible in 2 words. Jesus wins. Let's say it together. 1, 2, 3. Jesus wins. One more time. Jesus wins. We know how the story ends, and if you only remember that, just remember those 2 words, because they come really handy during difficult days. But what difference does it make to know that Jesus has overcome the world? How is the person of Jesus a catalyst in my own life? When I am facing a bad lab report, or when I've lost a meaningful relationship, or when I lost my job, how is Jesus the catalyst for me personally, in my reality, in my worldview, in what I'm facing? I want to tell you that today we're going to be going very deeply into the Gospel of John to see how Jesus makes a difference in our lives. Before we start, I want to tell you the story of the fork. And I have to tell you that, when I go to different churches and they've heard parts of my sermon before, sometimes they go, woohoo, because my ministry says, woohoo, for the joy of our salvation. Sometimes they say, Jesus wins. But I never come to a church before where I sit down and somebody in the audience shows me a fork, which happened this morning with Ron and Rosa, is it? I sit down and they take out a fork and they show it to me. And I have to tell you, I was so surprised. And they said, remember the Alaska camp meeting? So 7 years ago, I guess we met in Alaska, and they brought their fork. And you will know why in a moment. This is a very known story, but it became painfully personal not long ago. So the story goes that a pastor was called into a woman's home who knew she was dying. As pastors, we have this deep encounters sometimes when a person knows they're dying, and they call us to prepare their own memorial service with us. And this pastor was called in by this woman, and she said, Pastor, I have it all ready to go. I'm not afraid. He says, I know I'm going to see Jesus when I resurrect from the death. I know. So I'm facing this with assurance. And this is what I want. She said, I want my sister to do my biography, and my brother will do this, and my son will do that. And then she asked a very strange thing. She said, I want an open casket ceremony, and then I want you to put a fork in my hand. And the pastor said, I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood. And she said, no, you didn't. I want to have a fork in my hand. And the pastor said, why would you want a fork in your hand? And she said, because everybody's going to ask you why I have a fork in my hand. And this is what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them that because I'm older already, when we go to church and there's potluck, the young people bring me my plate. But when I'm done with my plate and they come to get the plate, if they tell me, keep your fork, oh, she says, I know a hearty dessert is coming and the best is yet to come. So she says, I'm dying with a fork in my hand, knowing that the best is yet to come. Now, this became painfully personal because one day I was preaching for one of the camp meetings in Idaho, actually, and I got a phone call, and it was my mother who had been suffering from cancer. And she said, I'm on my way to the hospital, and I think this is it. She said, I think this is the last time. But she said, don't worry, keep on preaching, because I'm holding a fork in my hand. So this became personal. It changed my reality that day. Yes, my mother was dying, but I knew how the story ends. And I still know that wasn't the end of the story. Jesus wins, and my mother could die with a fork in her hand because the best is yet to come. So today we're going to study one of the stories in the Gospel of John. And I want to encourage you to take notes And open your Bibles or your iPhones or your iPads, because we're going to go deeply verse by verse in this narrative, as we usually do when we study the scriptures. Please take notes so that you can share this with somebody that is needing to hear it, and for your own study. So before we get started, I want to tell you, and you can see I use a lot of props so you won't forget this topic, but I want to tell you a little bit about John. The Gospel of John. So this is where you can start taking notes so that you learn a little bit more about the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is not one of the synoptic Gospels. This is a big word, S-Y-N, synoptic. Synoptic means the same optic. So anytime you're reading a commentary and you see synoptic, it means Matthew, Mark, or Luke. Those are called the synoptic Gospels, which means the same optic. They tell very similar stories in a similar way. But John is not a synoptic Gospel. John is completely different than the other three Gospels. As a matter of fact, 92% of John is only found in John. Look at this percentage, it's very large. 92% of the stories on John are only found in John. And he handpicks those other stories that were not in the synoptic Gospels. He handpicks those so that you may come to believe in the person of Jesus Christ. It's very interesting because we rarely have the privilege of knowing the purpose for which an author wrote a book. And we have it in John. John, at the end of his gospel, tells us why he decided to write this other gospel when the other gospels were already written. Chapter 20 of John. Go there with me. It's very interesting. John chapter 20, verses 30 and 31 tell us why John decided to write this one gospel after the other ones were written. So let's go. Chapter 20 of John, verses 30 and 31. Ready? Therefore, many other signs, this is a big word for John, the word signs instead of miracles, as is in the synoptics. Many other signs Jesus performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. Oh, he says, he did many more things. He did signs all over that are not written in this book. No, they're written in the Matthew, Mark, and Luke synoptic Gospels books. But, verse 31, these have been written, these particular stories that I handpicked for you, these have been written so that. Anytime you see so that in the scriptures, it's a purpose statement, so pay attention. These have been written so that, he says, you may what? Believe. This is his word. This is John's word. He uses it as a verb, and he uses it 97 times in his gospel. The word believe, so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Oh, he says, I handpicked new stories that were not written before. I wrote those so that you may come to believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and he has done what he says he has done. That you may believe that he is the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So he writes his whole gospel. You're going to be amazed at this. He writes the whole gospel in two levels. The whole Gospel of John is written in two levels. Every story in the Gospel of John has two levels. The level that you see with your eyes, and the second level, which you come to believe when you believe in Jesus Christ. Two levels. Okay? Nicodemus, you got to be born again. How can I be born again and enter into my mother's womb? No, says Jesus, I'm not talking about this level, I'm talking about this level. Every story in John has a dialogue between the two levels. The reality you see and the reality you come into when you believe in Jesus. Two different realities. And every single story has a dialogue between the two realities. If you ever want to do a deep study in John, look at the two levels in every story. Samaritan woman, give me some water, but ask me for water. I have a different type of water. Sir, the well is deep. You don't have a bucket. How can you get this living water? No, says Jesus, I'm not talking about this water. I'm talking about this water. Nicodemus, I'm not talking about this birth. I'm talking about this birth. Chapter 9, the man born blind ends up seeing and worshiping Jesus. But the Pharisees who thought they could see end up being what? Blind. Every story in the Gospel of John has two levels. And you enter a second reality when you believe in Jesus Christ. So John will talk about 7 signs in his gospel, 7 signs. And he will be telling you, this is the first sign, the second sign, the third sign. So you can't miss them. 7 signs. And along with the 7 signs come the I am statements of Jesus. See, the synoptic gospels present Jesus in many different ways, like parables and things like that. John doesn't tell one parable in the whole gospel, but he has all the I am statements. I am. Tell me some of the I am statements that you know. I am. Very good. I am the door, I'm the resurrection, I'm the life, I'm the bread of life, I'm the good shepherd, I'm the vine. All the I ams are in John. That's how he presents, introduces who Jesus is to us through his I ams and his 7 signs. And today we're going to study the last and 7th sign that will take him to the cross. Every time in the stories of John, Jesus enters the scene and he becomes the catalyst for that problem, for that moment, for that event. And he changes the scenery. And Jesus does the same for us today. I don't know what grief, what pain, what sickness, what situation you came with. I just know that we live in a world where we will have tribulation, said Jesus. But be of good cheer, because there's a second reality. I have overcome the world, he says. So today we're going to study this 7th sign in John 11. So let's go, and the time goes very fast, but we're going to spend a good time on this chapter, John chapter 11, and I'm going to give you a lot of resources as we are reading. That's why it's important that you have the Bible and or your iPhone or whatever, and take notes so that you can share this. Chapter 11, verse 1, starts with a problem. Do you know that every single miracle of Jesus in the Bible starts with a problem? So if you have a problem today, you're blessed because you're a candidate for a miracle. So 11:1 starts like this. A certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany. And I'm going to stop right there because the name Lazarus comes from the name Eleazar, which means God is my help. So even at the very beginning of the story, we have a request for help and we haven't even started the story. His name was Lazarus, which came from Eleazar, which means God is my help. So the problem is he's sick. A man was sick. Eleazar, God is my help, was sick. Verse 2, it was the Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. And the sisters, verse 3, sent word to him saying, Lord, behold, him who you love is sick. And Jesus said, this sickness is not to end in death. It's for the glory of God. I have a plan. Wouldn't you love to know the plan? Both of my parents died of cancer in the last 5 years. And I'm an only child. So I mourned them over and over in a new way that I had never experienced before. And I learned a few things about God lately in my old age. It's funny how when you don't understand, like in the story of Abraham and Isaac and this story and all the stories, when we don't understand is when we learn new things about who God is. You know, I was asking God for a lot of things and I had requests. And then God said, just trust me. And my personality is not that easily fed by something like that. And so lately, in the last few years, I've been pondering that second part of Proverbs 3:5. Yes, trust in the Lord with all your heart, but the second part gets me. Lean not on your own understanding. Because I like to understand. I'm a type A personality. I want resources. I want information. I want the best doctors. I want the best treatment. I want answers. Lean not on your own understanding. Just trust me. Jesus says, don't worry about it. There's a plan. It's for my glory. And next, we have the strangest juxtaposition in the whole New Testament, verses 5 and 6. What a juxtaposition that we see in our own lives so many times. Verse 5, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, and when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 days longer. What? It says that he loved them, so it wasn't lack of love. I mean, if I get sick today, God forbid, and you call my husband and say, the one you loved is sick, he better be here tomorrow morning. You know what I mean? Because you expect the person to drop what they're doing and come because they love you. Jesus loved them, yet he delayed 2 days longer. Well, I always tell people to study the scriptures with a background commentary, and I can tell you more about that this afternoon. A commentary that tells you the customs of the day, so you understand why some things are happening. So I have to tell you here that there was a custom at that time. It's not what the Bible teaches, but there was a custom that said that the soul of a person stayed 3 days around the tomb, and only on the fourth day, he departed, and the person was really dead. That's not what the Bible teaches, but that's what they believed at this time in the first century. So Jesus will show up on the fourth day where everybody will know that this person is really, really dead. In their own minds. Of course, he was dead from the very beginning. But, that's why he showed up 2 days later. He showed up on the fourth day, and the narrative will say it was the fourth day, it was the fourth day, it was the fourth day, which means he's really, really dead. Because if he showed up 2 days before, nobody would have taken that as an actual resurrection. So I have made myself a little motto that helps me in difficult days. It says, the apparent delays of God are designed to show the magnitude of the miracle. I'm going to say it again. The apparent delays of God are designed to show the magnitude of the miracle. And so, after the 2 days, Jesus says, let's go to Judea. They're not understanding his timing. And I must confess, I never, ever, ever understand God's timing. And on verse 11, we get the 2 levels. Remember the 2 levels in John? Jesus says, let's go. We're going to wake up Lazarus. Verse 11. John 11:11. This he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I go so that I may awaken him out of sleep. But they didn't understand because the disciples never understand. They're so dense as we are. And they don't understand. And the disciples said, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be fine. No, says Jesus. Verse 13, Jesus has spoken of his death, but they thought he was speaking of his literal sleep. Remember the 2 levels? And Jesus said to them, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. Key word for John. Let us go to him. And here we come to the dialogue. Every time I talk about the different levels of belief, I like to use a grapefruit, so that we can visualize this. Now, the metaphor is not perfect, but you will help me with your imagination. So think that this is the belief fruit. This is belief or faith. The dialogue between Jesus and Martha will help us understand what level of faith gives us assurance. Because Jesus shows up, and Martha doesn't understand why Jesus didn't show up to change her reality. Why wasn't Jesus the catalyst when he was the catalyst in so many other realities? Martha knew that he had the power. Even in this narrative, people are saying, well, he healed the blind man. Couldn't he have healed Lazarus? So this dialogue, I'm hoping it will stay with you. But let's go to John 11:17. That's where the dialogue starts. When Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb, how many days? 4 days, which means really, really dead. Very good. He's really, really dead for everybody else in that custom, in that time. And so Martha comes. Let's keep reading, verse 18. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went out to meet him. Mary stayed at the house. And here we go, verse 21. Martha then said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And this was true. More than a reproach, this is a statement of faith. I know who you are, Jesus. How come you were not here for my brother? And then she says something interesting. But even now, I know. Please circle the I know. In the Gospel of John, God is trying to help people travel the 13 inches that are the longest journey a person will ever travel, which are from your head to your heart. So everybody in John says, I know. And Jesus says, but do you believe? Nicodemus says, we know you came from God as a teacher of God. And Jesus says, but do you believe? Martha says, I know. And Jesus says, but do you believe? And so Martha says, and talks about the first level of faith. Even now I know, she says, that whatever things, the Greek there is plural. She's not talking about the resurrection of Lazarus. She's saying, whatever things you still ask of God, God will still hear you. So even though you missed it this time, Jesus, whatever prayers and petitions you have for God, he will still give you. So what she's saying is, I still believe in prayer, and I believe God will still hear your prayers, Jesus, even though you missed it this time. This level of faith do you believe in prayer? I believe in prayer. Prayer, Bible study, worship services, all of these things that we do as Christians are the how of Christianity. How do we live? Well, we do all these things. It's called the how. We believe in prayer. We believe in Bible study. We believe in singing together. We believe in gathering together. These are spiritual disciplines, and they're very important. Now, she says, Jesus, even though you missed it this time, well, I still believe God can hear your petitions. The how of Christianity. And Jesus says, that's great, but there's more. And Jesus said to her, verse 23, your brother will rise again. And Martha said, I know, because Martha knows a lot of things. As a matter of fact, Martha will go to the second level of belief, which is called doctrines, what we believe. Are doctrines important? Absolutely, they're important because they are the way we access the core of the fruit. The what? As a matter of fact, Martha will quote the doctrine of the state of the dead almost word by word from our Adventist manual here in this verse. I know, she says, verse 24. I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. I have this, Jesus. Okay, so we're going to call this the what of Christianity. The what we believe. Oh, it's important to know what you believe. It's important because you're supposed to know what you believe. If you don't know what you believe, you're going to be lost. Now, important. Now, I got to pause in this place, in the middle of this story, and tell you that I have a burden. I have a burden when the way we evangelize is only peeling and white stuff, and we don't get to the core. I have a big burden on that. So I'm going to ask, being that Ron is so strong with his amens, can you come and help me here, please? I didn't tell him I was going to do that, but you have the personality for it. So I'm going to evangelize you.
Amen.
Okay? Amen. So I want you to keep the Sabbath. Eat that. It's edible. Eat it. Is it good? It is? Okay. Make sure you eat it.
Bitter.
It's a little bitter.
Yes.
Okay, so make sure you eat it from sunset to sunset. Keep going. Keep going. Okay. And pray a couple hours. Go ahead. Eat that too. Yeah, it's all edible, right?
Yes, it's edible.
Yeah. He's like, well, yeah, it's edible. Yeah, it is edible. Nobody said it wasn't edible.
I
No.
won't die.
No. I'm not sure, but that's okay. So, what do you think if I'm evangelizing you like this? What do you think is missing?
Tastes very good.
No, it doesn't. So how many years can a person go through life with pray 2 hours a day, keep the Sabbath, say the state of the dead? How many years do you think a person can live like that? Some of us, yeah, some of us have lived our whole life that way. But the truth is, these things exist with a purpose. And they exist with the purpose of going to the juice, the core that is the person of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Before I continue, let's give him a big hand for eating all of this. Thank you. So Martha is on the right track. I mean, I believe in the doctrines of the Adventist Church. I'm a pastor of Seventh-day Adventist Church for 20 years. I believe every single doctrine. I believe in prayer. I believe in Bible study. The issue is when all we have is peeling and white stuff and we haven't gotten to the juice that is the person of Jesus, I can absolutely guarantee you it will become bitter and dry. So Jesus is trying to get Martha to go from the how to the what to the who. So let's read it again, verse 21. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know, because Martha knows a lot of things, that whatever things you ask of God, he will still give you. I believe in prayer, she says. And Jesus says, but your brother will rise again. And Martha says, I know, verse 24. I know he will rise again on the resurrection on the last day. And then Jesus said, but there's more. Jesus said to her, but I am, ego eimi, is emphatic in the Greek, is I am. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Oh, it's so different when you come to the Jews. And then all of you are going, You know why? Because I got to the Jews. All these things exist with the purpose of bringing you to the who. All the hows and all the whats exist to go to the who. If all you have is whats and hows and you don't get to the who, all you're eating is peeling and white stuff. So when you go evangelize, and help me because the metaphor is not perfect, think of the whole thing like this. So then you go and evangelize like this, and you say, let me tell you, I know I will see my mother again. You know why? Because Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. And he paid her price at the cross. So I know I will see her again. Sounds so different that I know how to recite this doctrine. Now, the doctrine is important only because I got to the person of Jesus. If not, I can recite all I want. I will never get assurance. The assurance comes from the core, which is the person of Jesus Christ. Oh, yeah, she said. Oh, yeah. I forgot to tell you, says Martha. Yeah, I do believe that you are the Christ. Verse 27, she said, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who was coming into the world. Okay, says Jesus, if we get to the core, if you really know who I am and believe it, let's go to the tomb. You know, I had the incredible privilege of anointing both of my parents as they were dying. It's different to anoint anybody else other than your parents. But when my dad was dying, who was the one that my mom died 5 years ago, and this week is the 5-year anniversary of her death. My dad in Thanksgiving would have been dead 3 years. And I remember going to his house and saying, Dad, you've been a minister all your life. My dad was a pastor. As a matter of fact, some of you may know him. He was the White Estate director for the General Conference before Jim Nix. He was the previous director of the White Estate, for those that know what that means. He said, Dad, you've been a minister all your life. I know you know things, you know doctrines, you know Jesus. You taught me Jesus. He said, but I have to ask you because it's time to anoint you because you have only a few days left. And unless Jesus decides to do a miracle right now, he will do a miracle when he resurrects you, but there might be a delay factor, a few years in between. Because, you know, we're all getting Lazarus' miracle, just as some of us with a delay factor. And so I said, Daddy, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Now imagine this. He's sitting there and I'm here. Daddy, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He said, he who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Dad? Do you believe in the person of Jesus Christ who died in your place and will come and resurrect you? And he said, yes, I do. I know I will see him face to face. Not because of who I am, but because of what he has done for me. So he died a few days later. And when I went to bury him in the same spot where my mom was already buried, I asked the cemetery if they would allow me to put a key inside their tomb where the two of them are. And yeah, the cemetery said, fine. I showed up with a big key and they were, oh, that's a big key. I said, yeah, it's a big key because it's a symbol. What is it a symbol of? I said, you know, Jesus said, I hold the keys of death. Revelation 1, you guys have been studying it. I hold the keys of death. And I said, the next one that will open this grave is Jesus. And we'll see my key there because I believe he's coming for them. You know, it's different. He's the catalyst. Yes, it's sad to get a bad lab report. Yes, it's sad to lose a loved one. It's sad that in this world we have grief and pain and sickness and death. But we have a person who changes that, who is our catalyst. And he said, yes, in this world you'll have tribulation. As a matter of fact, you'll have death and pain and grief. But be of good cheer because that's not the end of your story. I have overcome the world, says Jesus. Jesus wins and you're with me. So you know how your story ends. And why is it that Jesus insisted in focusing our eyes towards him as a person? Well, really quick, because, you know, I have a lot to tell you. I want to tell you this word. This is a Hebrew word. This took over my whole life and ministry. Let's say it together. Goel. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Goel. One more time. Goel. Goel is the Hebrew word for the concept of kinsman redeemer. The whole Old Testament uses the word many, many times. Every time in your Bible it says redeemer, the word in Hebrew is Goel. The Goel was the closest relative that could do for his relative what nobody else could do. The Goel could redeem a relative that was in trouble. And I'm going to tell you really quick the 5 main roles of the Goel in the Bible. I wrote 2 books on this concept because it took over my life. Finally understood why I can have assurance of salvation is because of my Goel. Now, the kinsman redeemer had 5 roles in the Old Testament. Ready? To free a relative who was enslaved because of debt. So if you had a debt, you couldn't pay it, your goel could come and pay your price and set you free. Number 2, if you lost your land because of debt, only your goel could come and pay the price and bring the land back to the original family. Number 3, the goel married the widow of a dead relative so that to purchase descendants for the family. So the first son had the name of the dead relative, so he didn't die without descendants. So he would purchase descendants, make descendants for the family. Number 4, the goel could appear in court in place of the relative. Number 5, the goel would avenge the blood of a relative that was killed unjustly. Okay, ready? Let's go through it again. The goel could set you free by paying your price if you were enslaved. 2, could purchase your property back. 3, got descendants for the dead relative. 4, he could appear in court. 5, avenge the blood of that dead relative. Now check this out. This is unbelievable. When God made us in his image, in Genesis 1, 25 and 26, he obligated himself to rescuing us because he's our closest of kin. Did you get that? Did you get that? Because the whole Bible is based on this concept. When God created us in his image, he obligated himself to rescuing us because he's our closest of kin. So Jesus would come to do all the roles of the goel. And that's why the word redeemer in the Old Testament, when talking to about Jesus that would come, the Messiah that would come, is always goel. Because Jesus would pay our price and set us free. He would pay the price of our property and get it back. That's why the new earth will be here, because Jesus purchased it back. Number 3, he bought descendants from God, from a race that was mortal. That's why Isaiah 53 ends by saying, he will see his descendants and be satisfied. Because Jesus purchased descendants from a mortal race, and now we have eternity because of him. Number 4, he appears in court in our place. Number 5, he will avenge our blood at the end of times. All 5 roles of the goel, the kinsman redeemer, in Jesus, the person of Jesus, fulfill all the roles of the kinsman redeemer. That's why the Old Testament uses this word so much. Do not be afraid, says Isaiah 43:1, which is on my parents' tombstone. Do not be afraid, for I have goeled you. I have called you by name. You are mine. The person of Jesus, the juice of the fruit, is what gives you the assurance and is the catalyst when we face reality that we don't know what to do with, when we're confused, when we don't understand God. It is the person of Jesus that says, look, you can trust me because I'm your kinsman redeemer. The Adventist church doesn't have 28 pearls of great price. We have 28 doctrines. The doctrines are the angles through which we view the great pearl. We have one great pearl of great price, and his name is Jesus. And the doctrines are the angles of that. But if you're talking about a doctrine and you don't know how it relates to Jesus, stop talking about it until you understand. Because we do a lot more bad than good if we only do peelings without bringing people to Jesus. Don't talk to me about the end of times called eschatology until you talk to me about the one who said, I am the eschatos. I am the last. Do you know that the word eschatos is last? Where we get the word eschatology, which is last day events. So many people talk about eschatology without talking about the one who said, I am the eschatos. I am the last. Don't talk to me about the Sabbath if you won't talk to me about the one who said, come and I will give you rest. Because I am your true Sabbath. So, the Adventist church has one pearl of great price that we look at from 28 different angles. Important angles, same pearl. So, Jesus said, well, you're ready. Let's go to the tomb. And they went to the tomb. But then we realized that she wasn't ready. Because she had said she believed, but she wasn't really sure. Verse 38, John 11:38, Jesus, again being deeply moved, came to the tomb. And it was a cave, and a stone was laying against it. And Jesus said, remove the stone. We're ready. Martha got to the juice. Remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead. How many days? 4 days, which means he's really, really dead. You know, it's funny because sometimes the translations make funny interpretations. The King James says there, Lord, it stinketh. I think it's so funny that they uses the word stink with eth. Lord, it stinketh. Yes, it stinketh because he's looking at this level. But there's another level that she can enter into when she believes in Jesus. Lord, it stinketh. Jesus said, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Didn't we settle this a moment ago? And then he prayed because he also believed in prayer. But his prayer, touches my heart. They removed the stone, verse 41. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know you always hear me. But because of the people standing around, I say it so that they may believe that you sent me. Oh, all these people that have the Old Testament, the Jews were there. They went to church every Sabbath. They kept all the right dietary laws. They did all these things, but they don't believe in me, says Jesus. That they may believe in me. I am. Ego e me, the resurrection and the life. And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice. Can't wait for him to do that at El Montecito in Loma Linda, where my parents are. He said, Lazarus, come out. We have this joke in academic world that says that he had to say Lazarus because if he said come out, the whole mountain would have resurrected. Because of course, this was a cemetery right outside the city. And he said, no, not all of you. Lazarus, come out. And the one who had died, verse 44, came forth. And Jesus said, unbind him, verse 44 at the end, and let him go. I can't wait for him to tell the devil, unbind them. Juan Carlos and Alicia and all the people in the cemetery and all the people that believed in him in the whole world, unbind them and let them go. Jesus is our catalyst because he absolutely changes our reality. He changes our world. We know how the story ends and Jesus wins. This sign takes him to the cross in the Gospel of John. It's too much. It's too good. It's too loud. And they want to silence him. On verse 53, it says, from that day on, they planned together to kill him. I don't know what pain you're in, what suffering you came with. Jesus is the catalyst for your personal story, for your loved ones, for that lab report. No need to be afraid of the future because Jesus holds that in his hand as well. And because we're with him, we know how the story ends. Jesus wins and we are winners because he took us to the finish line. He's our Goel, he's our kinsman redeemer, did for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. I spent my whole life in the Adventist church. I was born in a minister's home. Yet it took me decades to live with the assurance of salvation based in the person of Jesus Christ. And there was a video that I'm going to show you right now that for the first time drove that into my heart. When I studied the Goel concept, when I understood that the reason why I have assurance is not because my life is perfect. No, as a matter of fact, John would say, it stinketh sometimes. But there's a second reality. That's why salvation is by faith. Because like Martin Luther said, when I look at myself, I don't know how I could ever be saved. But when I look at Jesus, I don't know how I could ever be lost. There's a second reality. And so one day I saw this video. Many of you have seen it because it's all over the internet. And I've been following their lives for more than 20 years. It's a Hoyt team. Just in case you don't know who they are, they live pretty close to my house in California. One day there was this boy that was born quadriplegic with cerebral palsy. The father was in the force, in the army or marine, something like that. And the doctors told him, just let him die. He's going to die in a few days. He's not worth it. He's too sick, too handicapped. And the father said, no, absolutely not. This is my son, and I'm going to do for him what he cannot do for himself. So he left his career in the army or Marines, and he dedicated his life to this child. And I followed it. So when the kid was 9 years old, they entered a 5K marathon for handicapped kids. And the father, with a wheelchair, went with this kid, the 5K. And when they crossed the finish line, this child had a big smile on his face. And because he cannot talk and his arms do not coordinate appropriately, they had built a computer that they would put a little thing on his forehead and he would type on the computer with his forehead. But they had to rush home to see why he was so happy. He was very, very smart, but he couldn't talk. So they got to the house, this nine-year-old kid, and he types and says, Dad, today when we crossed the finish line, I felt like I could walk. I felt like I was a winner. I felt like I was worth something. The father said, oh, my son, we're going to enter every possible marathon from now on because you are a winner. I'm going to take you to the finish line. I'm going to do this for you because you are a winner. You're my son. So years went by. Until now, they have entered more than 1,000 marathons together. For 20 years, I followed them. But it was the day that I saw the video of the triathlon in Hawaii called the Ironman. Triathlon. And I saw this father carry his son 126 miles of biking, 26.9 miles of running, 2.5 miles of swimming. Did you hear that? 126 miles of biking, 26.5 miles of running, 2.5 miles of swimming. And I saw this father carry this handicapped son to the finish line. It was the first time I understood the gospel of Jesus Christ. It was the first time that I realized how handicapped I am spiritually and emotionally. And yet, why I can live with a smile on my face, because I have a kinsman redeemer, a closest of kin, that has done for me what I could never have done for myself. And I'm sitting in that chair like this kid. And Jesus has, at the cross, crossed the finish line. And he said, it is finished. Now live with a smile on your face, because it's a sure thing, not because you're perfect. No, you stinketh. It's because of the second reality that I have done for you what you couldn't have done for yourself. And you're my child, and I love you, and I'm your Goel, your kinsman redeemer. There is a song in the video, my Redeemer lives. Now you know the Hebrew word, my Goel lives. Let's watch it, and then we'll finish.
Who taught the sun where to stand in the morning? And who told the ocean you can only come this far? And who showed the moon
would you do for your child? What would you do for your child who is handicapped? Well, I came to tell you what God has done for us. He has sent a kinsman, redeemer, a closest of kin, who has done for us what we could have never done for ourselves. That is our assurance. Does He change our reality? Is He the catalyst? Absolutely, He's the catalyst. He changes everything. He changes our reality. He changes our future. He changed the end. And He says, now live with a big smile on your face, because you already know how the story ends. I am your kinsman redeemer, your Goel. So go out there with a big smile and with a big cry. Jesus wins, Jesus wins. Because the best is yet to come. Not because of who we are, but because the catalyst has entered our lives and has told us how the story ends. Let's say it together, Jesus wins. 1, 2, 3. Jesus wins. God bless you.